went wherever the tides of life took him. After his family...
I knew the core of the sun would be hot, but this is ridiculous.
An 11-year-old Glenn decided to add an
Fuck
extra
you!
to his name because it looked cool. Can't argue with that, Glenn. And on another day, as a 24-year-old chemistry student strolling through the Berkeley campus, someone from the radiation lab stopped him and asked if he could help them separate out some chemical samples. He was just the first chemist they found on campus. Seaborg would eventually work his way up through the lab, and with Edwin McMillan gone, he asked if he could take over as the new captain of the element hunt. Although McMillan never got to try it out, he had come up with a recipe for element 94, and good old Glenn was going to get the first crack at it. If you add one neutron to uranium, it beta decays into element 93. But say you fired a proton and a neutron. The proton would immediately bump it up into element 93, and then the extra neutron would have a chance at beta decaying, upping it one more time to element 94. It really is like an absurdly delicate game of Jenga. So yeah, that's how you make plutonium. It's safe to say that the discovery of plutonium was kind of a big deal. It's actually an even better fuel for a bomb than uranium, which was the original plan for the Manhattan Project. And thus Seaborg and his team were immediately drafted to Chicago to work with... oh, hey, it's our old pal Fermi. There they spent months artificially making enough plutonium to flatten a city or two. It was difficult and hazardous work, and at one point a lead brick fell and broke a beaker, and 25% of the world's entire plutonium supply was soaked into a copy of the Chicago Times. But the Manhattan Project is a story that's been told many times by people better equipped to tell it than me. The story we care about involves Glenn Seaborg and Berkeley. By this point, they have enough plutonium for their bomb, so Glenn and his team are free to ponder some other questions. Why stop at 94? Surely the periodic table didn't end at such a weird number. And they didn't even have to reinvent the wheel. Instead of starting with uranium, just start with plutonium and fire neutrons at that. To go back to the Jenga analogy, you're trying to build a taller tower, but the bottom rows are radioactive, and they keep disappearing on you. But as long as you're building the tower faster than it's disappearing, maybe you can find a new element. Now at this point, we're going to pick up the pace a bit. There are still a lot of missing pieces between us and our friend Victor Ninov. If you want to read more, I highly recommend the book Super Heavy by Kit Chapman. Essentially though, the timeline went something like this. Element 93, discovered by Berkeley. Element 94, Berkeley. Element 96, discovered by Berkeley members in Chicago. Element 95, Berkeley members in Chicago. 2 atomic bombs are then dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, killing upwards of 250,000 in the immediate blast and poisoning the ground and air for decades after. Next up was element 97, once again found by Berkeley, and since they definitely earned it at this point, they named it berkelium. Element 98, hey, guess what? It's Berkeley again. They named it californium this time. With 4 elements in a row, the New York Times joked that they should have just gone with Universitium, Ovium, Californium, berkelium. It was at this point that the Nobel Academy finally acknowledged Berkeley's achievements, and so Edwin McMillan and Glenn Seaborg shared the Nobel Prize in Chemistry. Next up was elements 99 and 100, and this is going to sound extremely stupid. I swear I'm not making this up. America dropped a nuclear bomb in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, sent fighter jets through the very, very top of the mushroom cloud to collect samples, raced like hell to get the rapidly decaying lumps back to Los Alamos in New Mexico, where they were then analyzed to see if they had made any new elements. Yes, and unbelievably, they did. Since Berkeley helped out with the analysis, they were co-credited with the discoveries of 99 and 100. These were named after 2 of the field's greatest minds, Einstein and Fermi. Both of them had passed away just months earlier. And soon enough, there was element 101, again found at Berkeley, named to honor the creator of the modern periodic table. It truly was one of the most dominant streaks in scientific history. Every other lab was left playing catch-up and could do nothing but watch as Berkeley added nearly half a row to the periodic table. And there was nowhere else to go except further and further up. As of 1945, the 4 earlier gaps in the table had been filled. Elements 43, 87, 85, and 61 had all been isolated. If there were more elements out there, it was only going to get harder and harder to find them. From this point on, they would come to be known as the Super Heavies. As for Glenn Seaborg, he was once again going where the tides of life took him. His career took a turn when he received an out-of-the-blue phone call from John F. Kennedy, of all people. He was about to be named the next head of the Atomic Energy Commission. Later, he would become a close confidant of Lyndon B. Johnson, and they were apparently such good friends that Seaborg was regularly invited to the White House to just come hang out and chat. After he had made the fuel for the first atomic bomb, Seaborg would push hard for treaties that would limit the spread of nukes. This is not an attempt to absolve him of his role in that, but I think it's important to fully contextualize it. This is where Seaborg diverges from our story, but Berkeley does not. Every element in the streak from 93 to 101 had been discovered by a team with some sort of tie to Berkeley. From this point on, it would not be so clear-cut, and the controversy would play out on a geopolitical scale. There are a lot of famous Einstein quotes out there, but there is one I saw for the very first time while researching this video. This is what Einstein had to say on the topic of making new elements. It would be like shooting birds at night, in a country with not that many birds. So true, bestie. And he's not wrong. Element hunting is essentially like gambling. The basic setup is easy enough to describe. You have a target, and you have a bullet. Except both the target and the bullet are so small they're invisible, and also the target is almost certainly radioactive. And even if you do make a direct hit, there's a good chance you'll break apart or even destroy parts of your target. So this is less like aiming a gun at a target, and more like a game of roulette with the absolute worst odds imaginable. If you take just one spin, the odds of hitting the exact right pocket are not good. But if you take 5 million spins at the roulette wheel, your odds go from basically impossible to just barely within the realm of possibility. Yeah, the odds are terrible, but sooner or later, you're bound to get a hit. For element hunters, this means aiming a beam at a target and leaving it firing for literal months, which, you can imagine, gets very, very expensive. Depending on the lab and the type of beam, firing continuously for just one day can cost somewhere in the tens of thousands of dollars. A few months of beam time, then, is easily in the millions of dollars. We have a lot of uranium on Earth, about 5.5 million metric tons, and even the shortest half-life is still 25,000 years. So getting a large enough uranium target to fire neutrons at isn't really a problem. So making plutonium is easy enough. But then for the next level, your target needs to be plutonium. And then after that, it's curium, Einsteinium, etc. Each time, your target's half-life is getting shorter and shorter. 1 gram of uranium costs 13 cents. A gram of
It's
Einsteinium
raining tacos.